My 27th birthday was just another reminder of a life half-lived, a life I was starting to suspect wasn't even mine. Mom's getting hitched to Daniel, the human golden retriever, which meant clearing out the attic. That dusty, forgotten space held more than just moth-eaten clothes and broken dreams. It held the key to unlocking a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew. Lily, my younger sister, was humming some pop song as we hauled boxes down the rickety stairs. She always seemed effortlessly happy, bathed in a sunlight I could never quite reach. Mom, of course, was beaming at her, offering a gentle hand, a soft word of encouragement. Me? I was just the workhorse, the one who got things done, no fanfare needed. Digging through a box of ancient bills, my fingers brushed against something stiff, papery. A plain, white envelope, my name scrawled on the front in Mom's familiar handwriting. No date, no return address. It felt like a secret, a buried confession. My heart quickened. Was this it? Some hidden token of affection, a belated apology for everything? I ripped it open, and the world tilted. I never wanted to have you. The words swam before my eyes, each syllable a blow to the chest. I reread it, desperate for some other interpretation, some hidden meaning, but there was none. It was a cold, brutal declaration of regret. She wrote about a life derailed, a future stolen, a resentment that had festered for decades. She'd been young, in love, planning her escape from this dead-end town when I arrived, an uninvited guest. I wanted an abortion, but your father wouldn't let me. Dad. The ghost. The name never uttered without a sigh, a dismissive wave of the hand. He wasn't ready to be a father, she'd always said. The ultimate cop-out. Now, this was a weapon aimed directly at my soul. She went on, detailing her resentment towards him, her anger that he convinced her to keep me. But it was the next line that truly broke me. I did my best, but I've never felt like your mother. Not really. Not the way I do with Lily, the golden child. The one who deserved all the love, all the affection, all the things I was apparently unworthy of. I could feel something inside me crack, splinter, shatter into a million jagged pieces. Every birthday forgotten, every harsh word, every dismissive glance, it all clicked into place. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I was simply unwanted. The attic seemed to shrink, the air thick and suffocating. Lily called out, her voice bright and carefree. I shoved the letter back into the envelope, crammed it into my pocket. I needed to escape, to breathe, to somehow process this revelation. I mumbled something about a headache and stumbled out of the attic, leaving Lily to her cheerful sorting. I locked myself in my room, the letter burning a hole in my jeans. I read it again and again, each word a fresh wound. Confront her? Burn it? Pretend it never happened? The options swirled in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to force her to acknowledge the pain she had inflicted. But the other part, the small, scared child still clinging to the hope of a mother's love, was terrified of what she might say. Dinner was a blur of forced smiles and swallowed tears. Mom watched me, her eyes narrowed, sensing something was wrong. Lily chattered about wedding plans, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Mom laughed, a genuine warm sound that I had so rarely heard directed my way. I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion. Back in my room, I stared at the envelope on my desk. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a verdict, a confirmation of everything I had ever feared. Nothing would ever be the same. 3 days. 3 days I spent walking on eggshells, avoiding eye contact, choking down meals, and desperately trying to maintain the illusion of normalcy. But the letter was always there, a weight in my pocket, a poison in my blood. Every time I reached for my phone, I considered texting her, firing off a furious barrage of questions from behind the safety of a screen. But that felt cowardly, inadequate. I needed to see her face. to hear the truth from her own lips. Finally, after another excruciatingly awkward dinner, I cornered her. "Mom, can we talk?" She looked surprised, maybe even relieved. She led me to the living room, her movements stiff, guarded. I pulled the letter from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table. "Do you recognize this?" Her eyes flickered to the envelope, then back to me. A shrug. "I don't remember writing anything like that." The denial was weak, unconvincing. I unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "Enough!" she snapped, her face flushed. This was years ago. You don't know what it was like. But her eyes betrayed her. She was scared. I continued reading, each line a hammer blow. By the time I finished, she looked sick, defeated. "It's real, isn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't deny it. She admitted it was real, but insisted it was written a long time ago, that things had changed. "Did you mean it?" I pressed. "Did you really never want me? Did you really feel nothing for me, even as a kid?" She hesitated, pressed her lips together, then whispered, "I did the best I could." And then she said the words that shattered me completely. "If I could have done things differently, you wouldn't be here." Silence. A gaping, echoing void. She tried to backtrack, to explain. She was young, alone. She didn't know what to do. She never meant for me to find the letter. It wasn't something she ever wanted me to know. "Why did you keep me?" I demanded, my voice raw with pain. "If you resented me so much, why didn't you give me up for adoption?" Her voice cracked. I felt trapped. Your dad's family wouldn't let me. And by the time I realized I could have made that choice, it was too late. I was already a mother. I had already committed. "So you stayed," I said, each word dripping with venom. "You raised me, but you never wanted to." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Lily," I began. "Lily is different," she interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "With Lily, the first had a choice. I got to do things the way I wanted. But with you, I was just surviving. Did you ever love me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you ever look at me the way you look at my sister?" She hesitated again, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. "Not the way you deserved." I stood up, my legs shaking. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice pleading. "Away from you," I said, and walked out the door. I drove aimlessly, tears blurring my vision. I ended up in an empty parking lot, the silence amplifying the chaos in my head. I called Maya, my best friend, and spilled everything. "Cut her off," Maya said, her voice firm. "She doesn't deserve you." My phone buzzed. A call from Lily. I ignored it. Then a text. "What's going on? Why did you leave?" I didn't know how to answer. I still don't. For now, I'm staying away. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at my mom the same way again. I ignored Mom's calls for 2 days, letting them go straight to voicemail. She sent a flurry of texts. First concern, then confusion, then outright demands. "Answer me!" I finally cracked and texted Lily to meet me at a cafe. I needed to talk to someone who understood, someone who was also caught in the crossfire. Lily arrived looking pale and drawn. She didn't say a word, just took my phone and read the photo of the letter. Halfway through, her breath hitched, her hand clenched around the phone. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice tight. "Is that really Mom's handwriting?" I nodded. I explained everything, finding the letter, the confrontation, Mom's callous admission. Lily stared at the screen, her eyes darting back and forth over the words. Then she let out a shaky breath and wiped at her face. "I always knew she was different with you," she said, her voice trembling. "But I never thought. I just thought it was normal. That's just how families are sometimes." Then she told me something that made my stomach twist. "When we were kids," she confessed, "I used to wonder why Mom didn't hug you the way she hugged me. Why, when you got hurt, Mom would tell you to shake it off, but rush to comfort me if I so much as scraped my knee. I always thought it was because you were the older sibling, that maybe Mom just expected you to be tougher. Now I'm not so sure." She tried to make excuses. Mom had been young, alone. She didn't have help. But the letter loomed between us, impossible to ignore. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Neither do I admitted. Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the clatter of coffee cups and the murmur of conversations. Then Lily spoke again, her voice sharp, angry. "This isn't okay. Mom needs to explain herself." I warned her that Mom would try to twist things, make excuses, downplay it. "I don't care," Lily said, her eyes blazing. "I need to hear it from her own mouth." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "No matter what," she said, "you're my sister. Nothing changes that. And I'm not going to let this come between us." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. I didn't know what the future held, but at least I wasn't alone. A week passed. Lily confronted Mom, and it went badly. I didn't press for details, but Lily was shaken. Mom denied everything or minimized it, never admitting to any real wrongdoing. Then an unknown number texted, "Hey, I think we need to talk." I ignored it. A few hours later, another text. I heard what happened. I need to explain. A weird feeling settled in my chest. I Googled the number. Nothing. I sent a screenshot to Lily. "Maybe it's Dad?" She texted back. "Dad!" It had been years since I last thought about him. A ghost, a shadow, a name whispered with resentment. The next day, another text. "I know this is out of nowhere, but I need to talk to you. It's about your mom. Please answer." After a full 24 hours of agonizing, I replied, "Me, who is this?" A few seconds later, "Your father." My phone slipped from my grasp. "What?" "I'm not expecting anything. I just want to talk. If you want, we can do a call. If not, I understand." I went for a drive, parked in an empty lot, and stared at my phone. I was in shock. He must have heard through the grapevine and maybe felt bad. I texted, "Call me in 10 minutes." The phone rang precisely 10 minutes later. I let it ring twice before answering. A voice, unfamiliar, older than I expected. Hesitant. "Hello? Hello," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. He thanked me for answering. Then he uttered the words that turned everything upside down again. "I never wanted to leave you." I stayed silent, stunned. He started talking, a torrent of words spilling out after years of silence. He and Mom had been young, he said, in love. Or so they thought. When she got pregnant, he panicked, but he was ready to step up, to be a father. But Mom had made it impossible. They fought constantly. She didn't want him around. She told him he wasn't good enough, that she could do it on her own. He tried to fight for custody, but every time, she shut him down. Her family cut him off. He was pushed out, little by little, until one day, there was nothing left for him to hold on to. "I should have fought harder," he said, his voice cracking. "But I was young, broke, and after a while, I thought maybe she was right." "If you really wanted to be in my life," I asked, my voice tight, "why did you stop trying?" He hesitated. Then he admitted that Lily had reached out after she confronted Mom. She had gone looking for answers, found him online, sent him a message, told him everything. That was why he reached out. More silence. I hung up the phone. I sat there with a million questions racing through my head. If he was telling the truth, if he really had tried to stay, then Mom had lied to me my entire life. I had believed she was a victim, and maybe she had been one. But now, what was that make my dad? He never wanted me to know the truth that she wasn't a good person. The call came out of nowhere. I was in my car, parked outside my apartment, scrolling through my phone when an unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was one I recognized, but barely Daniel, Mom's fiancé. "Your mom is a mess," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. I stayed quiet. He said she had been breaking down ever since I left, that she wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, that she was devastated. Then the guilt trip started. "She made mistakes, but she loves you." I gripped the steering wheel. He didn't know the half of it. He didn't know about the letter, about Mom's callous admission that she wished I had never been born. Finding out my mom regretted me isn't something I can just move past, I said, my voice hard, a long sigh on the other end. Then he admitted that Mom had told him about the letter, but she downplayed it. According to her, it was something she wrote during a rough time in her life, a moment of weakness, something she never meant for me to see. Even he sounded unconvinced. He tried to explain things from her side. She had been young, scared, alone. She had no family support, no financial security. She didn't know how to be a mother. But none of that mattered. People struggle. People have kids under bad circumstances. People feel lost. But not everyone writes a letter about how they never wanted their child. She does love you, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. I don't know. She has a way of rewriting things in her head. Rewriting? I asked. He let out a slow breath. I've been with your mom for years, and she's never talked much about the past. I knew there was tension between you two, but I didn't realize how deep it ran until now. His voice lowered. But I have seen how she treats you differently. I thought maybe that was how your dynamic had always been. So why are you trying to convince me to talk to her? I asked. Because I'm afraid she's falling apart, and I don't know if I can fix it. This isn't something you failed to show for 27 years, I said. You either feel it or you don't. Then came the real reason for his call. I think we all need to sit down and talk. He framed it like a family intervention. If we all just got together, talked it out, things could be fixed. But this wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad argument or hurt feelings. This was a lifetime of knowing, deep down, that something was wrong, only to have it confirmed in the worst way possible. My relationship with my mom isn't something you can mediate, I said. This isn't your problem to fix. His tone shifted, less pleading, more frustration. If your mom doesn't make things right soon, he said, she might lose both her kids. I didn't have a response for that. We hung up. I called Lily and told her about Daniel's call. She was quiet for a long time. I confronted Mom days ago, and it hadn't gone well, she said, her voice heavy. There had been yelling, excuses, crying, every possible reaction except an apology. Not once had she admitted she was wrong. Now she was playing the victim, letting Daniel do the dirty work of trying to smooth things over. Are you going to meet with her? Lily asked. I don't know, I said. Lily called late at night. Her voice was rushed, frantic. She had gone back to talk to Mom, not for Mom's sake, but for her own. She needed answers, needed to hear it all from Mom's mouth. But what she found out was something neither of us ever saw coming. Mom didn't plan to have me either, Lily said, her voice trembling. That part wasn't shocking, but the reason why Lily was treated so differently was she was the result of a different relationship, one Mom actually wanted. Lily had always assumed her father had been just like mine, someone who walked out, someone Mom never spoke about. But that wasn't true. Mom had been in love with him, deeply. He was the man she wanted to start a life with, the man she saw a future with. Then she got pregnant. At first, he had stayed. She thought everything would work out. She had a partner this time. She wasn't alone. But then, just like with me, it all fell apart. He left before Lily was born. That was the difference. With me, she had never wanted to be a mother at all. I was an obligation, something she was forced into. But with Lily, it wasn't the pregnancy she resented. It was that the person she wanted to build a family with had abandoned her. So, she made a decision. Lily wasn't going to be another mistake. She was going to be her second chance. She tried to do everything right with her. She gave her love freely. She made sure she never felt unwanted. She overcompensated. But none of that changed the fact that for me, there had never been any love at all. Lily went quiet. I could hear the weight in her voice, a weight she had never carried before. She had always been the favorite, but now she knew why, and it had nothing to do with her. It feels like my entire childhood has been a lie, she said, her voice barely audible. I know exactly what you mean, I said. The next day, Mom called. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through. She said she owed me an explanation, that she wanted to talk. She sounded exhausted, maybe even guilty. I sat with the message for hours. Then, against my better judgment, I agreed. I told her we'd meet in public, a neutral place. And I told her straight up if she was going to try and justify anything, I was walking out. She agreed. When I got there, she looked different, older, worn down, like everything she had been trying to keep inside had finally cracked open. She didn't waste time. She apologized. The words "I'm sorry" actually left her mouth. It should have meant something, but it didn't. Because instead of just owning it, she kept blaming the past, her situation, her pain, everything that led up to why she did what she did. She said she regretted writing the letter, but her words felt rehearsed, like she was saying what she thought she should say. I waited, gave her a chance to say what really mattered, to tell me that she regretted feeling that way, that she had been wrong. Instead, she wiped at her face and whispered, I just wish you hadn't found it. My stomach turned. That was it. That was what mattered to her. She cried, said she wished things had been different, said she wished she had been different. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice flat, because I have to live with what you did. Every time you chose Lily over me, every time you made me feel like I was just there, while Lily got to be wanted. Even if she regretted it now, it didn't change the fact that she had spent my entire life making me feel like I was never enough. She had nothing to say to that. I stood up. Can we fix things? She asked, her voice desperate. I don't know, I said. Then I walked away. This time I didn't feel angry, just numb. Maybe this really was the end of our relationship. Maybe it wasn't. But right now I just needed space. I finally agreed to meet him. It had been weeks since the first phone call, since he told me he never wanted to leave, since he said Mom had made it impossible for him to stay. I had spent so long believing he was the villain, the father who walked out, the man who didn't care. That was the story Mom had told me, and I had never questioned it. Now, I didn't know what to believe. I picked a diner on the edge of town, neutral ground, public. If things got weird, I could leave. I got there first. The waitress came over, asked if I wanted to order. I told her I was waiting for someone. Then the door opened. I knew it was him immediately. He looked like an older version of me. Same eyes, same build, a little more gray in his hair, a little more weight in his face. But the resemblance was undeniable. For a second, he just stood in the doorway, scanning the room. Then his eyes landed on me. He walked over. We sat across from each other. Neither of us spoke at first. The waitress came back. He ordered a coffee. The silence stretched. Then, finally, he spoke. I should have fought harder for you, he said, his voice rough, like the words had been caught in his throat for years. He told me everything. When I was born, he had wanted to be involved, but Mom had already made up her mind. She didn't want him around. At first, he thought she just needed space, that she was overwhelmed, that maybe in time things would settle. But she never let him in. Every attempt to see me was a battle. When he tried to take legal action, she fought back. She painted him as unstable, as unreliable, said he wasn't fit to be a parent. Her family backed her up. One by one, every door closed. Eventually, he gave up. I regretted it every day, he said, his voice cracking. I should have fought harder, I should have done more. But at the time, I felt like I had no choice. I stared at him. This wasn't the story Mom had told me. She had always said he abandoned us, that he left the second things got hard, that he had never wanted me. But now, sitting across from him, hearing the cracks in his voice, seeing the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, nothing about him looked like a man who had walked away. He looked at me carefully. Then, he made an offer. I know I can't change the past, he said. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be in your life now. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, watching the steam rise from his untouched coffee. I told him I needed time. He nodded. We paid the bill, walked out. Then he turned to me, hesitated for a second, and reached out his hand. I shook it. Then I left. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but for the first time, I had a choice. Lily was the one who pushed me to do it. After I told her about the meeting with my dad, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, "You need to confront her." I had planned to just walk away, to leave everything in the past and move forward. But now, knowing the full story, knowing that Mom had actively kept my father away, it felt unfinished. She had lied to me for 27 years, stolen a relationship from me that I could have had. And after everything, she still hadn't apologized in a way that actually meant something. I texted her, told her we needed to talk. She agreed. I drove to her house, pulled into the driveway, sat there for a long time before finally getting out. She opened the door before I could knock. She looked tense, like she already knew what this was about. We sat in the living room. The air was heavy. Neither of us spoke at first. Then I told her I met my father. Her expression didn't change, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around the armrest. I told her I knew the truth, that he hadn't abandoned me, that he had tried to be in my life, that she was the one who had made sure he wasn't. She didn't react at first. Then she shook her head. "That's not true." I told her to stop lying. She hesitated. Then I pressed harder. I told her that he had tried to get custody, that she had fought him at every turn, that she had shut him out completely. Her face went pale. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate excuse. I waited. Then, finally, her shoulders sagged, and she whispered, "I didn't want to lose you." She admitted it. She had convinced herself it was for the best, that I needed her, not him, that if she let him in, he would eventually disappear anyway, and it would just make things worse. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had been selfish. She had wanted control. She had chosen to make me the casualty of her decisions. I stood up. She begged me to understand. She was young, she was scared, she didn't know how to be a mother. I told her that none of that mattered. She still had a choice, and she made the wrong one. She started crying. I watched her for a long time. Then I said the last thing I will ever say to her. I needed a mom, and you chose to be my biggest regret instead. The air outside was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I inhaled deeply, trying to fill the void inside with something. Anything. The conversation had been brutal, raw, and ultimately unsatisfying. My mother, stripped bare of her carefully constructed facade, was still unable to truly acknowledge the depth of the damage she had inflicted. Her apologies felt hollow, her justifications self-serving. It was as if she saw the situation as a series of unfortunate events that had happened to her, rather than choices she had actively made. I didn't know where to go from here. Cutting her out of my life entirely felt drastic, a final act of severing that would leave me adrift. But staying connected, even in a limited way, felt like a constant invitation for more pain, more manipulation, more gaslighting. The thought of ever truly trusting her again was laughable. I drove to Lily's apartment. She had insisted on being there for me, a lifeline in the storm. When I walked in, she met me with a hug, no words necessary. I could feel her trembling, her own pain mirroring mine. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice soft. "About as well as expected," I said, managing a weak smile. She apologized, but it was all about her, about how hard she had it. "She still can't take responsibility," Lily sighed. "I know. I'm so sorry." We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. Then Lily reached for my hand. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I need time to figure it out. I'm here for you, whatever you decide," she said. "And about Dad," I tensed. "What about him? Are you going to see him again?" "I don't know," I repeated. I need to process everything. It's a lot to take in. Lily nodded. I understand. But maybe it's worth a shot. Maybe he's not the monster we thought he was. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, I sat alone in her living room, staring out the window at the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just wanted to see if you got home okay. It was him. My father. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding. Should I respond? What was there to say? Finally, I typed out a simple reply. I did. Thanks. A few seconds later, he responded, I know this is a lot. I just want you to know I'm here if you need anything. I didn't reply. I didn't know what I needed. Over the next few weeks, I slowly started to piece my life back together. It was like rebuilding a house after a fire, salvaging what I could, throwing away the rest, and starting over. I focused on myself. I went back to therapy, trying to unpack the years of emotional baggage that I had been carrying around. I spent time with friends, laughing, connecting, reminding myself that there was joy and love in the world, even if I hadn't felt it for a long time. I started painting again, a passion I had abandoned years ago. Colors exploded onto the canvas, reflecting the chaos and beauty inside me. It was a way to express the emotions I couldn't put into words, to give voice to the silent screams that had been trapped in my heart. As for my mother, I kept my distance. I didn't block her number, but I didn't answer her calls. I didn't respond to her texts. I needed space, time to heal, time to figure out what, if anything, our relationship could be. Lily kept me updated. Mom was struggling. She was losing weight, isolating herself. Daniel was at his wit's end, trying to hold everything together. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Should I reach out, offer some kind of comfort? But the other part, the part that had been burned and betrayed, knew that it wasn't my responsibility to fix her. She had created this mess, and she needed to clean it up herself. One evening, I received another text from my father. Would you be free to grab coffee sometime this week? No pressure. Just thought it would be nice to talk. I hesitated, then agreed. We met at the same diner as before. He looked nervous, hopeful. How are you doing? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I'm okay, I said. It's been a lot to process. He nodded. I can imagine. I just wanted to say again that I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't your fault, I said, the words surprising even myself. He looked relieved. Thank you. That means a lot. We talked for hours. He told me about his life, about the years he had spent wondering about me, about the guilt and regret that had haunted him. He had never remarried, never had other children. He said he had always felt like there was a piece of him missing, a piece that only I could fill. I listened, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from me with the ghost that had haunted my childhood. It wasn't easy. There were still a lot of questions, a lot of unresolved feelings. But I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the pain in his voice. I don't know what the future holds, I said, but I'm willing to give this a try. I'm willing to see if we can build something. He smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile that reached his eyes. Thank you, he said. That's all I can ask for. Over the next few months, we started to build a relationship. It was slow, tentative, filled with awkward silences and stilted conversations. But it was also filled with moments of genuine connection, of shared laughter, of a growing sense of belonging. I learned that he was a kind, gentle man, with a passion for woodworking and a love for old movies. He was a good listener, patient and understanding. He never tried to force anything, never pressured me to forgive or forget. He just showed up, consistently, reliably, proving that he was there to stay. Lily, too, started to connect with him. She was more open and forgiving than I was, eager to embrace him as a part of our lives. Seeing them together, laughing and joking, filled me with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. As for my mother, the situation remained complicated. I started to respond to her texts, short, polite replies. I even agreed to a few brief phone calls. But I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe someday, in the distant future, I would be able to let go of the anger and resentment. But for now, I needed to protect myself, to keep her at arm's length. One afternoon, I was at my father's house, helping him sand down a piece of furniture. The phone rang. He answered it, his face clouding over. "It's your mother," he said, holding out the phone. I hesitated, then took it. "Hello?" I said, my voice guarded. "I need to see you," she said, her voice trembling. "It's important." "What is it?" I asked. "I can't explain it over the phone," she said. "Please, just meet me at the park in an hour." I hesitated. "Okay," I said, "but I'm not promising anything." I met her at the park, a place we had often gone when I was a child. It was a beautiful day, the sun shining, the birds singing, but the atmosphere was heavy, charged with unspoken emotions. She looked even worse than the last time I had seen her. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face gaunt. "What is it?" I asked again, my voice impatient. She took a deep breath. I'm sick," she said. "Really sick." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "They found something," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Cancer! It's bad." The words hung in the air, a cold, shocking revelation. Everything else, the anger, the resentment, the pain, seemed to fade into the background. What kind of cancer?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Pancreatic," she said. "They caught it late. It's not good." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so scared," she said. I stared at her, my mind reeling. This changed everything. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Chemotherapy, radiation, whatever they tell me to do. But they said it's not likely to work." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "I'm going to die," she said. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The years of anger and resentment didn't disappear, but they were overshadowed by a wave of compassion, of empathy, of simple human connection. She was my mother, and she was dying. "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "We'll get you the best doctors, the best treatment. We'll fight this." I reached out and took her hand. It was cold and frail. "I'm here for you," I said. "I promise." The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I knew what I had to do. It wouldn't be easy. There would be pain, there would be tears, there would be moments of doubt and despair, but I wasn't alone. I had Lily, the first had my father, and I had a newfound sense of purpose. My mother had given me a difficult start in life, a life filled with pain and rejection. But she had also, in her own twisted way, given me a gift, the gift of resilience, of strength, of the ability to overcome adversity. And now, as she faced her own mortality, it was my turn to give back. It was my turn to show her what it meant to love unconditionally, to forgive even the deepest wounds, to be there even when it was hard. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I now know that I won't be doing it alone. It wasn't the ending I expected, but in a way it was the ending I needed. It taught me about forgiveness, it taught me about letting go, and it taught me what family is truly all about.